So thank you for the opportunity you give us to speak about our missionary organizations and the approach to the mission in the last years or 3 past years. You know what we are doing. I'm speaking about CEVAA, which is a community of churches in mission. We have member churches, especially in Africa region, the North, the South, Southern Africa, or Central or West Africa, and also in the Pacific region and Latin America. But we have the member churches in Europe also, in France, Switzerland, and Italy. We are in a pandemic context, and it was very difficult for the church in Europe than churches in Africa, because in Europe we were confined and difficult for members to go to church, to get in community, those solidarity. But what we have seen in Europe, especially in France, is that there is a solidarity between members, and they develop what we can say churches in home, or home churches. So people used to get in touch by video, but because what has been developed is the role of the media, and especially Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook to get in touch. So they have now worship in presence, also in what we call distancial, because it is the word now, distancial meeting. But in Africa, in our churches, the media are not very developed, but they have imagination to get in, to be in touch, and the role of the pastors change. So they are now obliged to go to see the members in the church. So they are in close contact with the members at their home. They have group, what they called for Methodist class. You have about 20 people or members to be together. What changed is the role of the media, what we call new technology for communication. That's those technologies play a big role for the churches. It was not that a few years ago, but we see how those new technology of communication helps the churches, help pastors, and they have to be trained in that way, because pastors don't know what YouTube is, but they have to imagine it to be trained in that way. So we have seen also the role of the radios, the broadcast of churches, also they used to use the broadcast of churches for worships, for to give information and to help those who cannot go to church to follow the worship together. That's what I can say. To resume, is that the new technology of communication play a big role now, and we have to use those technologies in our approach of missionary today's or nowadays.
Thank you, Celestine. I think quite a number of what you have shared is the same with United Evangelical Mission. That might be because we are similar organizations, so we are also a communion of churches with 39 members in Asia, Africa and Germany. What has been a big change is a communication structure. Especially the German people had to learn a lot. Because in the past, if it comes to partnership relationships between church districts and congregations, we always had complaints from German members saying, well, they are not answering our emails. And for a long time I told them, well, email is not the first media our friends and brothers and sisters in Asia and Africa are using. They are more affiliated with social media. You have maybe to learn to utilize the social media. And in this time of the pandemic, the German partnership groups discovered that they can communicate easily via WhatsApp. They never did before. They could have done that already years before, but in the moment when there were no physical meetings and the need of talking and discussing the situation of the churches, they discovered, well, we can communicate via WhatsApp. And they discovered, well, we can even celebrate services, church services together on YouTube. And we can organize the communication. So the communication has very much improved in the times of the pandemic. But on the other hand, many of our people engaged in mission work are falling back, when it comes to Germany, are falling back into old habits of giving and receiving. And also some of our members in Asia and Africa are falling back into this habit of receiving, want to receive something. I can understand that because there is a big demand of getting material help. So very different to the situation in Germany, where we have a social security system that covered even all these people who lost their jobs in the pandemic because there was no work. The system in Asia and Africa in some of our member countries are different. So we have people who are still working on a daily salary. They go to the market or to places where they get a job for a day and the salary for a day. And with the lockdown, these people have become even more vulnerable because there was no opportunity to work at all. So they had to fight hunger again. Even in countries like Tanzania, they had this problem. So then we as a United Evangelical Mission decided to help these most vulnerable people by building up a big fund for distributing to these people. And we could take from our reserves 1 million euro, and we ask our members who have the capacity to contribute also to this fund. So finally we could distribute around 2.5 million euros to the most vulnerable people in the countries. But by doing so, an old mindset of giving and receiving came back. And we had partnership groups in Germany. They even wanted to distribute again and again to churches who did never ask for something. And that is interesting. So there was this habit of we are the ones who can give now again, as we did in the 60s and 70s maybe. But with this, it was also obvious that stereotypes were coming back. So a stereotype of all Africans are poor. Well, this is a stereotype. It's not true. And when we had this a big flood in Germany, there was an immediate reaction of the communion of churches from Africa and Asia, and they sent offerings to the German churches. More or less about 50,000 euro they sent to help the victims in Germany. And that opened a discussion in Germany, how can UEM take this money from these poor countries? And we said, well, this is not everybody is poor in Asia and Africa. They are rich people. So let us receive it with respect, because they are living the solidarity we have within the United Evangelical Mission. And let us discuss on the stereotypes. So what we did is that we distributed a paper on partnership where it is mentioned that within the pandemic, old patterns of thinking were coming back, and we need to discuss that to overcome it, so that we will have again the discussion on the same level and not falling back into these old habits. What we need, we realized also, is that for the future we need a good balance of physical and digital meetings. We had for 2 years digital meetings only, and in the last month, in February, I was the first time in a physical meeting of our African board, leading the African region. And in this physical meeting, we were all of the same opinion that we need these real encounters, because the spirit of the mission agency, sitting together, singing together, praising the Lord, is missing in digital meetings. We do so in digital meetings, but it is very different. You cannot embrace a computer. You cannot clap hands with the screen. So you need people going together to that. You cannot dance alone in front of the screen. It looks somehow funny, but you can do all this in the physical meetings. So we will develop a balance, because we also learned that many of the issues we discussed in the past in physical meetings we could have done via screens in digital meetings. We could have saved a lot of CO2 exhaust, we could have saved a lot of time, a lot of money, if we would have discovered that before the pandemic. With the pandemic, we learned that, and we are looking now for a system where at least every year once we will have a physical meeting in our governing bodies, and where we can encourage to continue with the digital meetings even after the pandemic, because it would be a shame if we give up what we have learned so far. What we also realized in the pandemic is that the world economy system is incredibly unjust. That was very apparent in the pandemic, because in the time when German people were looking at the shelves in the supermarket, they were complaining that the pasta is not going to be bought easily, or the flour is not there for baking bread. But that was maybe for 1 or 2 days, and the next week everything was in stock again. But in some of our members' areas, this is a question of daily nourishment not getting for a long time, and that is because of the economic injustice we have, and we will fight that again and again, looking forward to proceed what Jesus himself says the kingdom of God has to come. So the pandemic has a lot of disadvantages, but I also said we learned a lot within, as you also said, Celestine.
Maybe what I want to say, to emphasize on the physical meeting, because we had our General Assembly by video last year, but we have some subjects which people said we need to make the physical, we need time to discuss, not only to take a decision, but to be together, because the mission is also to meet, to be together, to discuss about our projects, not only for decision. It's very important, but also we discovered that we can have a virtual meeting. You know, we have people from Latin America at the same time. It was an experience, but it cannot. What I can say is that it's important to balance the video and also the physical meeting.
And there's also a point we have to share about the experience with the Digital General Assembly, because we are planning for our General Assembly this year to be a physical meeting, but who knows? So I know that you were planning for a physical meeting, and it is an election General Assembly, so we need to meet. This is the last time we can do, otherwise we would get in compliance with our own constitution. So if there is no possibility for a physical meeting, we need to have a digital meeting, including elections. It is possible, but so far all our members said they prefer to have a physical meeting. That was the reason we postponed it from last year to this year. That was possible because of an exception law in Germany that allows us, although the constitution says it's different, to postpone it for 1 year. But this year we need to have the General Assembly.
Okay. That's what we did. We postponed for 1 year, but we have election.
You are always ahead of us. You are 25 years more experienced than we are. Yeah, thank you for the question. I realized this morning that we have the International Women's Day. I have to be honest, because I was looking something at Google, and the doodle of Google for today was on the Women's International Day, and it was very interesting to me. Actually, we also do some things in respect of this day within UEM. But in Germany, where the IT and the website is located and hosted, it's still night. So I do not know what they will put on the website today, but I will look at that. The question about the role of women in our member churches is very relevant, because United Evangelical Mission has a gender policy, and all members have to apply this gender policy if it comes to programs and projects within the supervision of United Evangelical Mission. But they are still independent churches, so we cannot force an independent church to do something. We only can force them if they want to participate in a program of UEM. They have to obey the rules of that. There are many structural possibilities. So if we come to the General Assembly, for instance, if a church has 2 delegates, they shall compose of men and women. But this is also not a law. It is already the highest level if it says they shall, and not should, or we are asking. But if a church decides not to send a man and woman, but only 2 men, we cannot do anything against that. What we can do is, for instance, on scholarship. 2 years back I sent a letter to all our members, 3 years back, it was before the pandemic, that only churches who have endorsed a woman for a scholarship can endorse a man again for a scholarship. So it has to be alternative. That has finally led to a balance that out of the 80 scholarships we have running at the time being, 38 are for women. So we almost have reached the balance. If it comes to the leadership positions within the churches, it is quite very diverse. So we have a new member coming from Indonesia, from Kalimantan, the Evangelical Church of Kalimantan. They have already introduced the ordination of women in 1962. That was years before some of the German churches did so. And the German churches always were telling, oh, we already ordained women for a long time. And now this Indonesian church comes and says, well, we did it already longer than you in Germany did. That has led to a new level of the discussion, because we still have one church in the communion of churches, the Baptist Church of the Democratic Republic in Congo, who do not ordain women. And in the past they always could say, well, this is only a question coming from Germany, but now we have an Asian church saying the same and asking for that. And what we did now, we offered them to send trainees, how to convince the people on the grassroots level, and how to convince the middle level, and finally the leadership, that the ordination of women is something relevant for the communion of churches. The next General Assembly in Germany in September of this year will finally decide whether a member who is not ordaining women can remain as a member within the communion of churches. That is a question that is going to be discussed, but it is a difficult question. If it comes again to the role of women, we try to have a balanced leadership level within the organization. If it comes to the member churches, until now there's only one German member church who is headed by a woman, that is the Church of Westphalia, and the Kalimantan Church, which I was telling about. They are also headed by a woman. Actually, in the highest level of the leadership, there are 5 people in that churches, 3 of them are women. So the president of the church and 2 others are women. And I visited that church in 2018, and I was in a church district, and I had to be a little bit ashamed because my question was in this church district, well, how many women you have in the position as a pastor in your district? And then the answer was, well, all of us are women. So there was not even one male pastor in the whole church district. Because this church has a very long tradition. If it comes again to what can we do, it is like it was with other questions. We cannot, with the scholarship, we cannot force churches to change their habits, but we can put quality standards on our programs and projects. So if a church is applying for a program or a project, they have to fill in the form how many women are participating, and is a balance ensured that women and men will get the same access to everything. So that is what we try to do on this issue.
So in CEVAA, I can say that it is not theoretical, but it is a practical, the role of women in our member churches. As Reverend Volker said, for our General Assembly we have 2 delegates, and 1 must be a woman or a youth. And if you see in Africa, also in the Pacific region, in the churches you have women, and without women it is difficult to talk about worship or about the activities of churches. So you have a union of women in our churches. But it is not only to participate to activities, but they have leadership Also, you have, for example, the Methodist Church of Togo. A woman is the president of the church, and in Pacific Maori Protestant Church, the General Secretary is a woman. The same thing at New Caledonia, and also in some churches in Africa. In our organization, the former president of CEVAA was a woman, Henriette Mbachu, and the elected General Secretary is a woman. So my successor is a woman. So we can say that it is a reality, the role played by women in our member churches. So that's what I can say. You are talking about International Women's Day. Yes, we have the GMP, Mondial Journey of Prayer. So we had it last week, and it was organized by women. So they participate to that activities. And about the vaccine injection, you know, in Africa, people are aware about or afraid about vaccine of COVID. But what we do, CEVAA, is in the pandemic context, we help the church hospitals. We have a hospital in Lesotho, in Zambia, Rwanda, Benin, Cameroon, Ghana, Ivory Coast. So we have them to sensibilize the people, and we use also the radio to sensibilize people. But you know, in Africa, people are not, they don't adhere to the vaccine or for vaccination. So the government use also the leader of churches to sensibilize people. But in Europe, in France, for example, we have more than 80% people vaccinated. So we have to work in that way in Africa, because they say there are not many people who died, and the symptoms of COVID are similar for malaria. So they say it's malaria, so they are in prevention than how to say, more than prevention in Africa.
Yeah, I have to add for the first question, actually we have 3 German members being headed by women, because I was thinking in the beginning only of one that is already for a long time, but the last elections brought also two other women into the leadership of churches, and in June there will be a synod of another Asian church, and as far as I was informed, there might be a good option that the general secretary of that church will also be a woman in future. If we are talking on vaccine injustices, yes, we are aware of the unjust actually distribution. But we do not accept the argumentation of the German government, and even of Bread for the World was following the same argumentation. They were calling for a just distribution of the vaccines with the argumentation, because only if the people in the south are vaccinated, the virus will not come back to Europe. And this is the argumentation we said as a mission organization we will not follow. We are for just distribution of vaccination because people are threatened by this and not because we are afraid of getting that back. So we issued some statements on that and also informed our government that there is a necessity of a just distribution of the vaccine. And we are not only calling for a just distribution, we are also calling for lifting up the patent regulations on the vaccinations so that other countries can produce the same vaccination at their respective countries. One question I cannot answer because I'm not a scientist is that it is somehow awkward that in European countries only those vaccinations are recognized as valid which are produced in Western countries. How secure Sinovac or Sinopharm is, I cannot answer because I'm not a scientist. But to see that it is only the Western productions that are distributed in Western countries makes me somehow wondering on that. We have the experience a little bit similar as Celestine shared with our members in Asia and Africa, that the challenge to fight other diseases like malaria, Ebola is more threatening than the COVID-19 disease because there are not so many people that has been infected by the COVID-19, for instance in Tanzania, than by malaria. Even today, more people die from malaria than from COVID-19 in some of our member countries. So that is a question. I had a friend in Indonesia who was in the beginning saying, well, you German people are very disciplined because people are following the vaccination schedule. And I said, no, this is not because of the discipline of the people, this is because they are afraid. Otherwise it is not that way. And now we see it in Germany. We have not reached the 80% of people being vaccinated because a lot of people do not trust our government also, as in other countries. So it is it's quite a challenge to get people moved to get vaccinated. And wherever we can do something as a mission organization to convince people, we try to convince them, especially because we know from personal experiences how big the threat of this disease is.